Narrator, deep, slow, suspenseful tone. It was a night most people would rather forget. The streets were quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't feel peaceful, but dangerous. Streetlights flickered weakly, leaving long shadows across the cracked pavement. A mother walked quickly, clutching the small hand of her child. The boy's backpack bounced with every hurried step, his eyes wide, searching the darkness. The mother's face was pale, tense, her lips whispering silent prayers that the road ahead would stay clear. But she wasn't alone. Hidden in the distance, almost blending with the shadows, sat a man on a wooden bench. His posture was calm, too calm for a night like this. The world knew him as John Wick, but to her in that moment he was just a stranger, an unnoticed figure quietly watching. He didn't move. He didn't speak. The faint glow from a street lamp revealed only part of his face, sharp, expressionless, unreadable. Yet there was something in his stillness, something that spoke louder than words. The mother didn't notice him at first. Her focus was only on her child, but the boy glanced over his shoulder, and for a second their eyes met. There was no greeting, no smile, no wave, just silence. A silence heavy enough to leave a mark. The boy tugged on his mother's sleeve. "Mom," he whispered, pointing toward the bench. But when she turned, Wick had already lowered his head, vanishing back into the shadows. To anyone else, he looked like a tired man resting at the end of a long day. But the truth was different. His silence was not weakness. It was vigilance, because John Wick had already noticed what the mother could not. Shadows moving at the far end of the street, footsteps too heavy to belong to ordinary passers-by, and though he sat still, his mind was already calculating, already preparing. For him, this wasn't just another night. It was a night where his silence would become the only shield between innocence and danger. Narrator, low, tense tone. The mother's footsteps grew faster, echoing softly on the cracked pavement. She tried to keep her pace steady, but fear has a way of leaking through every movement. Her hand squeezed her son's tighter, as if her grip alone could keep him safe. The boy looked up, his small face caught between trust and fear. "Mom, why are we walking so fast?" he whispered. The mother forced a smile, though her voice trembled. "We're almost home, sweetheart. Just a little further." But home was not as close as she wanted it to be. From the far end of the street, heavy footsteps emerged. A group of men stepped out of the shadows, 5 of them, loud, careless, and cruel. Their voices cut through the night like broken glass. "Well, what do we have here?" One of them sneered. Another whistled mockingly. "A late-night stroll? With a kid?" "Dangerous out here, lady," the mother froze. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears, but she forced herself to move, pulling her son closer. She tried to pass them without a word, eyes fixed on the ground, but they spread out, circling like wolves. The leader stepped in front of her, blocking her path. His grin was wide, filled with arrogance. "Where are you heading in such a hurry?" The boy clutched his mother's coat, burying his face against her side. She placed her hand protectively on his head. "Please, we don't want any trouble." The men laughed.
Trouble?
"Oh, don't worry. Trouble's already found you." From the bench in the shadows, John Wick had not moved. His stillness was almost unnatural, like a statue carved from the night itself. But his eyes never left the scene. Every gesture, every mocking laugh, every tremble in the mother's voice. He noticed all of it. He didn't speak. He didn't rush. But inside, a storm was already beginning. The leader leaned down, his face inches from the mother's. "You look nervous," he said softly, cruelly. "Relax, we just want to talk." One of the men stepped toward the boy, reaching for his backpack. The mother shoved him back, her voice breaking. "Don't you dare touch him." The men roared with laughter. "A fisty one, huh?" The boy's eyes darted again toward the bench. He didn't understand why, but somehow he felt safer knowing that Silent Man was there. Even without words, there was strength in that presence, a promise unspoken. The mother's voice shook as she pleaded. "Please, just let us go." The leader tilted his head, pretending to think. Then he smirked. "Let you go?" "Nah, we're just getting started." And that was when John Wick finally moved. It was subtle at first, the creak of the wooden bench as he rose to his feet. The sound was so small, yet in the silence that followed the men's laughter, it echoed like thunder. The leader turned his head, annoyed. "And who the hell are you?" He barked. Wick didn't answer. He didn't need to. He simply stepped forward, one slow stride at a time. His eyes locked on the men. There was no anger in his face, no words of warning, just silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. The kind of silence that makes predators second-guess their own strength. The men exchanged glances, their laughter faltering. Something in his presence unsettled them, though they couldn't explain why. The mother looked back, tears brimming in her eyes. She didn't know who he was, but she knew in that moment they were no longer alone. John Wick was here, and silence was about to become their greatest shield. Narrator, tense, steady voice. John Wick stood in the middle of the dim street now. His footsteps were slow, deliberate, like a man who already knew how this night would end. The mother pulled her child closer, her voice whispering frantic prayers. The boy peeked from behind her coat, his small eyes fixed on the stranger who walked without fear, without words. The men stared, first in confusion, then in irritation. Their laughter returned, forced and uneasy. The leader scoffed. "Look at this guy. Thinks he's some kind of hero." He took a step forward, squaring his shoulders. "Hey, I asked you a question. Who the hell do you think you are?" Wick didn't respond. Not a single word. He simply stopped a few feet away, his face calm, his eyes steady. The silence stretched, pressing on them like invisible weight. The men shifted uncomfortably. Predators hate silence. It takes away their control. One of them tried to laugh it off. "What's the matter?" "Cat got your tongue." He spat on the ground, smirking. "Or maybe you're just too scared to talk." Still, Wick said nothing. He didn't need to. His silence wasn't weakness. It was power. The leader grinned, misreading his calm as fear. "You don't scare me, old man. If you know what's good for you, you'll walk away right now." Wick tilted his head slightly, almost curious. He didn't blink, didn't flinch. His silence was more unnerving than any threat could have been. The mother whispered, her voice trembling. "Please, just let us go. He's done nothing to you." But the leader only smirked wider. "Done nothing?" "Oh, sweetheart, he's about to." He nodded to one of his men. The thug stepped forward and shoved Wick hard in the chest. But Wick didn't move, didn't stumble. He stood like stone, unshaken. The thug blinked, unsettled. "What the—" The boy's eyes widened. He didn't understand why, but in that moment he felt something. This silent man wasn't afraid. This silent man was different. The leader spat out a mocking laugh. "You're pathetic. Just standing there like you don't even care. Say something, damn it!" But Wick's silence had already spoken louder than any word could. Every second it stretched, the air grew heavier. Every moment he refused to answer, the men's confidence cracked a little more. And then Wick finally moved. Not with words, not with threats, but with a single step forward, slow, steady, unyielding. The men instinctively stepped back. Their bravado faltered. For the first time, doubt flickered in their eyes. The leader snarled, trying to hide his unease. "Big mistake, old man. You should have stayed quiet." But John Wick already had, and his silence was about to become their greatest fear. Narrator, deep, tense tone. The street went still. The mother clutched her child, frozen in fear. The group of men circled, their grins stretching wider, mistaking John Wick's silence for surrender. The leader barked a laugh, stepping closer. "Last chance, old man. Turn around, and maybe we let you crawl away." But Wick didn't move, didn't blink. His silence pressed on them like a dark cloud before a storm. The leader snarled and shoved him, hard, but Wick barely shifted. His eyes never left the man's. And then, like lightning splitting the night, John Wick struck. It happened so fast, the thugs didn't realize what had happened until it was already too late. Wick's hand snapped forward, catching the leader's wrist. In one swift twist, bones cracked. The leader's laughter turned into a scream that never fully escaped his throat. Before the others could react, Wick pivoted. His elbow slammed into the jaw of the man beside him. Teeth scattered across the pavement, the man collapsing with a groan. The others roared in anger. "Get him!" 3 men rushed at once. Wick didn't waste a sound, didn't waste a move. The first swung wildly. Wick ducked, driving his knee into the man's stomach. Air burst out of his lungs with a wheeze as he dropped to the ground, gasping. The second came from behind with a bottle, swinging it toward Wick's head. Wick leaned aside, caught the man's arm, and with one cold, precise motion, snapped it backward. The crack echoed down the street. The bottle shattered as the thug screamed in agony. The third froze mid-swing, horror flooding his face. Wick's eyes locked on his. No words, no mercy, just silence. A single step forward, and the thug stumbled back, tripping over his fallen friend. He scrambled to his feet, but Wick was already there. One punch to the throat ended his fight before it could even start. The leader, clutching his broken wrist, staggered back. His voice trembled now. What are you?" But Wick gave no answer. He moved with terrifying calm, each strike clean and efficient. He wasn't fighting to show power. He wasn't fighting to prove himself. He was fighting to end this, quickly, decisively, silently. The mother shielded her son's eyes, whispering, "Don't look, baby. Don't look." But the boy peeked through his fingers anyway, and what he saw would burn into his memory forever. A man who spoke nothing, yet said everything with his actions. The last thug, desperate, grabbed a metal pipe from the ground. His hands shook as he swung wildly at Wick. Sparks flew as the pipe scraped the pavement. Wick sidestepped, calm as ever. His hand shot forward, catching the pipe mid-swing. With one brutal twist, he yanked it free, then spun it in his grip. The thug's eyes widened in terror. Wait, too late. Wick struck once, clean across the chest. The thug fell to the ground, wheezing, unable to rise. Silence returned. Only the sound of heavy breathing, groans of the fallen, and the faint trembling of a terrified leader remained. Wick dropped the pipe. It clattered against the street, echoing into the night. He stepped toward the leader, who stumbled backward, dragging his broken arm. "Please! I didn't mean—" But Wick said nothing. He only stopped inches away, his cold gaze boring into the man's soul. The leader's knees buckled. He collapsed, crawling backward like a beaten animal. Finally, he screamed at his remaining men, "Run! Get out of here!" They didn't need to be told twice. Those still able to move scrambled into the night, dragging their broken comrades, their bravado shattered. The street was quiet again. The mother slowly lowered her trembling hands from her child's eyes. Her lips parted, a soft gasp escaping as she stared at the man who had just dismantled an entire gang without a word. John Wick didn't look at her. He didn't smile. He didn't speak. He simply stood in the silence he had created, the storm that had come and gone in the span of moments. And in that silence, the mother and child were safe. Narrator, soft, reflective tone. The street was silent now. The echoes of violence had faded, replaced by the soft whimper of a child and the trembling breath of his mother. Around them, the fallen men groaned in pain or lay unconscious, their pride shattered more than their bones. The night's arrogance had turned into fear, but John Wick stood in the middle of it all, motionless. His chest rose and fell in calm rhythm, his eyes fixed on nothing in particular. It was as if the storm that had raged moments ago had never touched him. The mother clutched her boy tighter, her hands shaking. Slowly, cautiously, she lifted her gaze toward the man who had just saved their lives. Her lips parted, but no words came. Gratitude and disbelief collided in her throat. Finally, she whispered, almost too softly to hear, "Thank you." The words hung in the air, fragile and trembling. Wick didn't answer. He simply turned his head, his dark eyes meeting hers for the first time. There was no smile, no nod, just silence, and yet in that silence, she understood. Her son, no more than 7, peeked from behind her arms. His wide eyes studied the man in wrinkled clothes, his face cut with faint scars, his presence heavy like a shadow. "Mom," the boy whispered, tugging at her sleeve. "Is he a hero?" The question pierced the night like a bell. The mother froze, her lips quivering, her eyes locked on Wick. But Wick didn't move. He didn't say yes. He didn't say no. Instead, he knelt. Slowly, carefully, as though lowering himself into another world. His eyes softened just slightly as he looked at the boy. The boy hid at first, burying his face in his mother's side. But curiosity was stronger than fear. Inch by inch, he peeked again. Wick extended his hand, not with force, not with command, but with quiet patience. His palm open, waiting. The boy hesitated. The night was filled with uncertainty. But then, with trembling courage, the child reached out and placed his small hand in Wick's. The contrast was striking. A hand that had broken men, that had ended battles in silence, now held the fragile fingers of a child with impossible gentleness. The boy's voice cracked into a whisper. "Thank you, mister." For the first time that night, Wick's expression changed. It wasn't a smile, not fully, but there was the faintest softening, a fleeting glimpse of something human beneath the stone. The mother's eyes welled with tears. She covered her mouth, unable to stop the sob that escaped. Not of fear anymore, but of relief. Wick gently released the boy's hand and stood. His gaze swept the street, the groaning men, the shattered arrogance, the silence that now belonged to him. He didn't linger. He didn't wait for recognition. With slow, measured steps, he turned away. The mother called out, her voice breaking, desperate to give him something more than just a whisper. "Wait!" He paused, his back to her, the glow of a street lamp casting his silhouette against the night. She stammered, wiping her tears, searching for words worthy of what he had done. But in the end, all she could manage was the truth. "You saved us." Wick remained still. For a heartbeat, 2, 3. The silence seemed endless. Then he lowered his head slightly, a gesture so small it might have been missed by anyone else. But to her, it was more than enough. And then he walked. His footsteps echoed softly down the street until they faded into nothing. He disappeared into the city's shadows the way he had arrived. Quiet, unseen, leaving only questions behind. The mother clutched her son tighter, her tears finally falling freely. "He's not a hero," she whispered into the boy's hair, though her voice trembled with doubt. "He's something else, something more." But the boy smiled, his eyes still fixed on the path where Wick had vanished. "He saved us," he said simply. "That's all that matters." And in the silence that followed, under the broken glow of the streetlights, the legend of John Wick grew once more. Not through words, not through glory, but through a single silent act of protection. Narrator, deep, reflective tone. The street returned to its stillness, as though the night itself had conspired to erase what had happened. Only the faint moans of defeated men remained, scattered across the concrete like broken shadows. But John Wick was already gone. His figure dissolved into the darkness, carried away by silence. The same silence he had wielded like a weapon. The same silence that now echoed louder than gunfire. For the mother and her child, the world had shifted. They stood there trembling, their lives spared by a man who asked for nothing, who demanded no thanks, who left without a trace. To them he was more than a savior. He was a mystery. The boy clung to his mother, his small voice piercing the quiet. "Mom, who was he?" The mother could not answer. She only knew one thing. She would never forget the man who defended them without a word. Hours later, the whispers began. In the city's back streets, in dimly lit bars, in the smoky corners where criminals gathered. The story spread like fire. A group of men tried to corner a mother and child, and were taken down by someone they couldn't even touch. He didn't even speak, not once. The tale twisted, grew, became myth. Some said the man was a ghost. Others said he was a legend returning from the ashes. But to those who had seen the truth, the groaning men left broken in the street, it was simpler. It was John Wick, and his silence terrified them more than any bullet ever could. Far from the noise, Wick walked alone. His steps were steady, unhurried. Each footfall was a reminder. He was alive but not living. Present but never truly here. His silence wasn't emptiness. It was memory. Every step carried the weight of a past soaked in blood and love lost too soon. He remembered her, his wife, her laughter, her warmth, her voice, a voice that had once filled his silence with music. now gone, leaving only echoes. The silence he carried wasn't chosen. It was forced upon him by grief. But tonight, that same silence had saved a life, and perhaps deep down, that was why he had stepped forward. The city lights flickered in the distance. Wick's figure blended with the shadows, but inside him a storm raged. He had not fought for glory. He had not fought to prove himself. He fought because no one else would. Because in a world full of cruelty and noise, sometimes silence was the loudest resistance. The mother's tearful eyes lingered in his mind. The boy's trembling voice, asking if he was a hero, clung to his heart like a question he could never answer. Hero? No, heroes lived in stories. John Wick lived in shadows, and yet, in that child's eyes, he had seen something he thought he had lost. Hope. Days turned to weeks. The story of that night continued to ripple outward. A bartender whispered it to a customer, lowering his voice as if afraid the silence itself might be listening. A street vendor repeated it to a stranger, insisting he had heard it from someone who saw the aftermath. Even among killers, mercenaries, and men of violence, the rumor spread. He doesn't need words anymore. His silence is his warning. His silence is his weapon. The myth of John Wick grew not through the gunfire of his past, but through the quiet of his present. And the mother? She never told the full story. When neighbors asked, she simply said a man appeared and saved them. But late at night, when her son couldn't sleep, she told him the truth. There was a man, she whispered, stroking the boy's hair. A man who didn't need to speak. He saved us because it was right. And maybe one day you'll understand that silence can speak louder than any voice. The boy nodded, wide-eyed, never forgetting the weight of the stranger's hand in his. To him, John Wick was not a ghost, not a killer, not a legend. To him, John Wick was proof that even in the darkest night, someone would stand for what was right. Narrator. Soft, closing tone. John Wick disappeared back into the shadows, as he always did. He left behind no words, no promises, no trace of himself, only silence. But in that silence, he carved something eternal. A memory in a mother's tears, a lesson in a child's heart, a whisper in the city's underworld. He was not their hero. He was not their savior. He was John Wick, and sometimes the loudest legacy is left in silence.